Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. How are you all doing? It's Monday, so time for our check-in. We should be live now. I think we are live now. There we go. And we're muted. No feedback, which is awesome. How are we doing? T-Boy, will there be a delay today? Nowadays, 11 min is long. Oh, right, yes. No, we're here. Yeah,
Sneaky reference to us being 11 minutes late last week.
I know that's not like us at all. Usually we're really reliable, in all honesty. So you know that, T boy. You've been with us a while. Yeah, we did make it
Yeah.
work. Well, kind of made it work. I don't know whether it's. I can hear Ronnie typing furiously. Do you want to mute yourself just while you're typing, Ronnie? If you want to kind of
Yeah.
dip in, then.
It's like the house where I'm living right now has a squirrel that's getting into like the inside roof space, and the landlord is going to come and fix it at some point. But he's very active. I mean, it's just going into winter, so he's storing a bunch of nuts out there. But he's that's exactly what I hear every morning. Just
I
this
have.
scrabbling around.
I had my final year in uni. There was six lads living together, and we drew straws for the rooms. And I ended up with the biggest room at the back of the house. And I was like made up, and it's like this flat roof extension. But what I didn't know before I went into that room was that it was just like mice and rats just crawling around. That's all I could hear every night. It was just horrendous. That was horrible. There's one
Yeah.
big Billy Beef rat that used to come like stomping around as well. But there we go.
Well, whilst we're telling the story, my dad used to live in Africa for a few years, and he said there was a spider that like would you could hear it walking along the floor, like you could hear its like feet on the floor because it was so big. Like, anyway, let's back to the matter at hand. And the topic of today's session is taking control of your A levels, which is this year. It's important every year because students are often very passive in their learning of A levels because that's how you've always been up until you do your GCSEs. You're basically spoon fed everything, and then A levels is your first step into a little bit of academic freedom and independence. And often students aren't quite ready for it. But this year, more than ever, taking control of your A levels and sort of being responsible for driving that vessel, which is you and your grades, and being in charge about yourself is more important than ever.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, you go through kind of secondary school and to GCSE and everything's kind of put on a plate for you. Like, it's like everything's kind of like nice and insular. I learn this little thing and then this little thing and then this little thing. And it all adds up into, being able to kind of take these bite-sized chunks to kind of pinch the phrase from the BBC site. And it works. But it doesn't work like that for A level now, does it? Everything's interlinked and everything's intertwined. And plus it's a lot harder. So, just being spoon fed isn't necessarily going to get you that AA star, So and as Rich said, in these uncertain times, you don't know when you're going to be in college. I know a lot of you are kind of on this kind of half in, half out. You're being taught some of your lessons online, some of your lessons in school or college. So, it's more important than ever before to be able to kind of get a grip on things and have your own plan and do what it is that you want to do.
Yeah. So we're going to go over some sort of strategies and in fact, let's put an open question out to the chat. And if you're watching the recording, feel free to share this in the comments. Any changes that you've done in order to take control of your A levels, to be responsible for getting the grade that you want, rather than just turning up to your lessons, doing your homework, and then packing your bag away and calling it a day. Like, what do you do that facilitates you being in control of getting the grade that you want at the end of the year? So I'd love to hear that from the chat. I know there's some people here. T-Boy has actually completed his A levels. So any experience you have from having done your A levels and now looking back as a university student, we're going to share some advice with you, which in fact, a lot of this is, if you watch our live from last week, which was A-star study habits, a lot of these things are going to overlap there to some extent, because in order to take control, you have to be aware of what's required from you. So my first piece there is back to the specification. One of my students at least once a week asks me, what do I need to know for this module? Or do I need to know about this topic in the specification? And I'll answer them and give them my opinion on how important it is if it is in the spec, but the specification will tell you all of that. It's really important. That is everything that you need to know. It doesn't give you all the details like the textbook does, but if you are ticking your way through that as you move through the year, and you're more than halfway through the year and you've done less than half of the spec, then you can start to see you're behind. And you don't know that you're behind if you just go out to your lessons and you follow your teacher, and then they might dump on you Easter holidays. Oh, by the way, do all of module 8, which is like a quarter of the year. Do all of module 8 in the Easter holidays, and then we'll test you when you come back. Like that's a problem if you end up that far behind. So
but also, as usual, maths is different because what's really, and sorry, my camera isn't on because of minor technical issues that we decided not to spend 11 minutes fixing, but that's why my camera isn't on. But the problem in maths is that one word can mean 1 hour of learning or 60 hours of learning. So in the spec, it will say partial fractions, and you don't know what they are, and you don't know how important they are, and you don't know how long it will take to learn. And it says integration by substitution. Now, one of those things, if you haven't done it the day before the exam, we can do it. The other one, if you haven't done it the day before the exam, or even a week before the exam, or even a month before the exam, it's too late. So in maths, because different things are different things, it's really, really important that you don't look at the spec and say, I've done 80% of the spec, because you might have done the easy 80%. So basically, in terms of marks, you've only done 40%. So trigonometry, integration, differentiation for the second years, way more important than anything else. And they're at the end of the book, so the sort of thing that your teacher might not leave till the end of the year. So in terms of taking control, looking at differentiation, integration and trig second years from now, super duper important.
Well, that's why it's so important to have like a trusted teacher ideally, but obviously in the case of us, we're effectively your tutors, knowing not only what you have to do, but how long that usually takes students. So leaving the most important, the hardest topic to the end thing to learn is a very dumb idea. We try and introduce the harder topics earlier on, so you've got more, you might not understand it very well at the beginning. Anything that you learn that's new and complicated, you're not going to learn perfectly from the first time, but introducing it early gives you the time to get familiar with it, to build those layers of knowledge, to build it up so that when you do get to the exam 3, 6, 8 months later, that you are capable of doing those skills competently and without making mistakes. So not all spec points are equal. So yeah, absolutely, I do agree with that.
Really, really important. We've got some great comments in the chat here, guys. I just want to kind of bring a couple up, if that's all right with you. And these are things we were going to say anyway, which is brilliant. This is a really big one. So T-Boy said, studying more independently, covering content before it's covered in school is an important thing. It really, really helps a lot. And that was one thing. I'm moving up the top here so everyone can see it, actually. So people worry that, well, if I'm not doing what I need to do what my teacher says, and it's this thing I was talking about from GCSE, and that's fine. It's great that if you trust your teacher and they know what they're doing, that's absolutely amazing. But the thing is, you still need to take responsibility for yourself, because how many times, if I had £1 for every time I heard students like, well, I had a rubbish teacher, so that's why I didn't get the grade I wanted. And it's like, well, the thing is, the book stops with you, okay? I mean, you take control of everything here, and that includes your learning. So getting ahead, even if it's just watching some content guide videos that, if you're going to be doing alkenes in organic chemistry next week, okay, and you're just coming to the end of the previous section, just sit, get a cup of tea and a couple of biscuits and just watch the videos on alkenes. At least you know what's coming up. You don't have to take any notes or anything, but just having that foresight and having that kind of view into the future really, really helps. And attached to that actually is getting this scheme of work from your teacher, if at all possible. Ask, or at least find out, when are they planning on finishing the specification, because you need to make sure that, for year 13s, that's the end of March, to give you a fighting chance of actually revising effectively and building up through those grades and fine-tuning your knowledge and exam technique ready for those exams in the summer. So do find out when your teacher is planning on finishing the spec, or even better, get their scheme of learning from them if they're willing to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. And something we see a lot of our successful students doing, there's many ways that you can use tailored tutors, or there's many ways you can study the A levels. But if you're completing the content first, or basically watching our videos before your lessons, I've had a lot of feedback from dyslexic students, especially about this, is that you're creating a sort of a map, or you're creating a place where that information lives. You're getting a very clean explanation the first time round. And if you're doing that before your lessons, then when you go and sit in your classroom, you're going to make sense of it, or much more from first listen in the classroom, because it's actually going to be your second time through because you've done it once already. And by doing that, it means that there's way fewer gaps in your knowledge. You get way more value out of your school lesson. So by watching one 10-minute video before the class, you can then basically get an extra hour's worth of value from your school lesson, which basically means there's fewer things that you don't understand. And yeah, it massively helps with your comprehension. It means that if you understand it, then you will have less work to do in terms of revision later in the year, because you will actually be revising or revisiting content rather than relearning stuff that you didn't really get to grips with in the first place. So another massive point is try to familiarize yourself with the topic before the class lesson.
Yep.
And then your lessons will make way more sense.
Absolutely. Slightly off topic, Ronnie, do you want to weigh in on this whole exam boards now saying that they're reducing the content thing, just to kind of nip it in the bud?
As far as I know, there is no intention of exam boards to reduce the content. They said that very, very clearly. It wasn't one of those things where they put out an announcement and it could be interpreted to mean. They specifically said we will not be reducing the content. And to an extent, that's actually a really, really good thing for you guys, because there is lots and lots of evidence that when you reduce the spec and give students choice in the exam paper, then the expensive schools, I don't know how to phrase those students who go to private schools tend to do much, much better than students who don't go to private schools. And so it's actually an advantage for the average student for there not to be a portion of the exam that is based on choice. Having said that, we've just had 6 months where, for example, the government and Ofqual said, no way will we be using the calculated grades, and then they use the calculated grades based on absolutely zero anything and directly contradicting everything that they'd said they were going to do. So I don't know, but I certainly know that that sort of officially so far the exam boards are saying that the content will not be reduced. I don't know what that means for coursework subjects, because none of our subjects are coursework.
They chose to delay the exams by 3 weeks. That was the choice. When they did that consultation, it was, do we delay the exams? Do we reduce the content and make it some questions optional? Do we do both? And their outcome from that was delay the exams by 3 weeks. So that is the current official advice. This year, nothing's off the table in terms of what could happen. Who knows? But don't get caught out by thinking, oh, it's definitely going to be reduced content, I'm not going to revise that topic because I don't like it, and making those decisions now would be foolish. You should assume that the full content, if there's another announcement, we'll let you know here on the TT YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe so you get all those notifications for when we're doing stuff like that, because we've got our finger on the pulse with the official line and what the actual up-to-date information is. So,
and also, if they do that, which I don't think they will, but I didn't think they'd do lots of things, if they do that, then come back, because we will be giving a lot of advice about how to cope with that, because as I say, it's usually the private school students who do better in exams where there is choice. So super duper important to come back and get some advice about that and how to cope with it should that happen.
And I think, this, in terms of, we can't predict what might change between now and the exams. As it stands, we can only play what's in front of us, and that is you are doing your exams, albeit 3 weeks later than what we were expecting them to be. But, and we see a lot of students like, oh, we had like 3 months off or 4 months or whatever it was, and 3 weeks isn't going to help. Well, actually, it's better than no weeks, right? And I think one thing that we can't discount that might happen this time around is that the exam boards do come to your teachers and ask them for, the kind of working grades that they asked last year's students for. So teachers may still have to go back and look at your homeworks, look at your tests, look at your mock exams, and use those to send to the exam board, because they might actually be used in conjunction with your exams. So one thing we were just talking about before, myself, Rich, and Ronnie, is that this year, we were talking about taking control of your A levels, more important than ever before, and that is taking responsibility for every homework, for every test, for every mock exam. And again, like if we had £1 for every time we heard last year's year 13 say, but I didn't revise for my mocks. I didn't know they were going to be used for anything important, this, that, and the other. Well, you've now got the benefit of hindsight from all of that, okay? Not only, what we're saying is put every effort into every single homework, use your free periods, be proactive, every single test, revise for every single mock, because even if they don't get used, those grades, for calculating, predicting, whatever you want to say, a grade for you in the summer along with the exams, even if they don't get used, you will be as on it as you possibly can be ready for the summer, because you've been working consistently through the year and revising in small chunks for those tests and homeworks and mocks you've got. So it's an absolute win-win for you guys this year by just putting in every single effort you can towards those tests and mocks as they happen throughout the year. And of course, we're here to support you to do that. Okay. So that's one massive bit of advice to help you guys, get to grips with your A levels as well. And that is basically, you could be like, Rich, you're telling me just to work harder. It's like, but as we were talking about before, it's not about revising for an extra 10 hours a week. It's doing the right things in small chunks at the right times, and you can achieve just as much working smarter, not harder.
Yeah, absolutely. Just copying out your notes until you've remembered them, like you might learn a 10-line poem, is not the right strategy for learning the 800 pages of the A-level biology textbook, because that's not a sensible strategy. And we can help you with what are sensible strategies. I saw Scarlett saying in there, especially for maths, that active practice is everything. Yeah, you wouldn't try to get better at piano by just like copying out the notes from the song and learning the song in theory. There's lots of other things going on there that you need to incorporate the whole thing in practice. You need to make mistakes. Let's say you're going to make 10,000 mistakes before you get to mastery. Well, the sooner you make those mistakes and get them out your way, the faster you're going to get there, which is why testing and retrieval practice and all these things that we help coach you with are so important to progression and getting better, basically. Snooker game, I don't use my textbook, just TT. Is that fine? 100%. I wouldn't recommend chucking your textbook in the bin like a username has done with all his notes, but I would totally... Oh, I've frozen. Have I frozen? In real life, I haven't frozen, I promise you. Yeah, but yeah, your textbook, maybe there's something that you want to go read up on in more detail that's a bit beyond the spec. There's lots in biology in the textbooks that will not be in the exam. It's background, wider reading information that simply you don't have to know for the exam. So yes, use TT. That's the most streamlined way. You can obviously ask us questions. There's something you can't do with a textbook. If you don't understand it, just ask me a question. Do I need to know this? How are they going to ask me questions on this? Can you send me an example question that covers this spec point? That's my job. I can help you with that, and same for Rich and Ronnie there as well. So yeah, ignore your textbook only if there's something that you specifically really want to go read into more detail, and then you've got Wikipedia or the internet as well.
Yeah, that's it, because I think the one huge advantage we've got, and I'm sure you teachers have as well, but we've kind of lived and breathed these exam papers for years now, and we know what's likely to come up, the ways in which they ask particular questions, the difficulty and the weighting of those questions in the exams and stuff like that as well. So we can absolutely help you kind of decide if you are looking to kind of streamline, like, right, if I'm going to do A or B, what should I do? You can always ask us that as well in terms of your learning. We don't throw the kitchen sink at it like an 800 page textbook does. We're giving you everything that's important and nothing that's not, if you know what I mean. So
also, I always remind my students, those textbooks had to be ready for when the spec was launched, 2015, for the biology and chemistry spec. So that meant those textbooks were written with the sort of advanced spec. They had only the spec points, no exams to look at. And so that was the person, even with all the care in the world, was having to predict what was going to be in it. And to be officially endorsed by the exam board, they have to make sure every single possible thing is covered, which means they have to cover more stuff than is going to be covered, if that makes any sense. They've got to...
And also, the maths ones didn't include parametric integration. And then they realized that it didn't include parametric integration, and it was like a big thing. Is it going to include parametric integration? And then they added it to the specs. Yes, it does include parametric integration, but the books don't have it.
Yeah, it's they were either predicting what they think's going to be come up in the exams, or the textbooks, they're in a very difficult position because you have to write and publish the textbook basically before anyone's ever seen any of the exams, which is whereas with our courses we can they're short. I created videos in the first place that they've not tested, and I've taken them out of the course now because I can see that that's not what they meant when they wrote that spec point. You have to interpret what the spec point means, imagine how they're going to assess it, and then for me write videos that cover those points. But I got some of them wrong. I'm happy to hold my hands up and say that, but I have the luxury. It's not a print media. I can change that. I can refilm that video, swap it out. I can take a video out. I can add a video in. It's a living, breathing thing, the course.
You took the words out of my mouth there. I was literally just going to use that phrase there, Richard. We are living and breathing. We react to every time there's exams. Like the October exams have just happened. As soon as we get our hands on the October exams, then we'll be taking a look through those. We'll be recording the videos for the exam guide for when they're released, and we'll be learning from those and adapting our courses to suit. So, with TT that you've got the most up-to-date and most relevant information at your fingertips. And I think, again, it helps you, just to go back to the main topic of this, is taking control. And you can rely on this, and it's a reliable source of information for you.
So I've got another question for our viewers there, both in chat and in the comments. Like, I'm assuming nearly all of you have done your GCSEs. You might be an AS student who had their GCSEs cancelled last year, but in which case, work with me. Imagine your most recent mock or another exam that you've done, a real exam. So when you were sitting there, maybe your first exam in a subject, and you didn't feel completely ready, and that's, in my personal experience, most exams, I feel like I could do better if you gave me another week of just dedicated study for that exam. So what is it that you would like? How would you want to feel when you sit in that exam room for the first time for your A levels? And what advice are you going to give to yourself now, your future self going to give to yourself now? What practical, realistic advice that you think you could achieve would you give yourself? Now, use your past experience of doing exams where I didn't start past papers early enough. Whatever that advice may be, I'd love to see that in the chat from a student's perspective right now, because we can tell you everything in the world, that we see 1,000 students a year making these same mistakes. And if you really want to do well, then these are the things that you should do. But me telling what you should do isn't really going to resonate that well with you. And some will, some won't. And if you can visualize that moment when you're sitting in an exam and you read that question, it's like, I didn't have time to revise this, I don't know the answer, that's going to cost me 6 marks, which is probably going to cost me a grade. That's the thing we're trying to help you avoid by taking control of your A levels. Okay, any of those?
Go try really, really hard in my mocks, do loads of past papers. Yeah, some good advice there for both Scott and Katie. Yeah, revising as you go. Revision is a word that really we shouldn't be throwing around until March. Everything you do up until March is like consolidation, unless, you're revising for a test or a mock or something like that. But consolidating as you go and just making sure you actually understand it as you go along before moving on to the next thing, because leaving things behind and go, you know what, I'll just sweep it under the carpet and I'll deal with that later. Doesn't work. Never.
Yeah, I was just going to say as well, the word revise and do past papers. I think we should have T-shirts that have the word revise crossed out and the words do past papers crossed out, because doing a past paper, as in putting pen to paper, writing down the answers that then looking at the mark scheme to see how many you got right and see what the other answers were, doesn't improve your grade. It does not improve your grade doing that process. It feels like it is going to, but then what happens is after a while, you realize your grade isn't improving, and it's horribly stressful because what other process have you got? So doing past papers, try not to think of that and try to use the TT revision method. I'm not being a salesperson here. It's totally free. It's just a method for using past papers to actually improve your grade. And revise as well. What does that mean? Revise. Does it mean copy out your book? Does it mean copy your book onto little pieces of card? with a bit on one side and a bit on the other. What does it mean? So turning these processes into actual active things that you can do that have been proven to work in terms of developing your learning and improving your grade, that's what really matters. It goes back to what Scarlett was saying right at the beginning, I think it was Scarlett, about the way that you use your time. Maybe it was snooker gaming. Like, it's not how many hours you do, it's what you do in those hours that actually makes the difference to your grade.
Yeah, you could spend 10 hours doing 2 past papers and marking them, maybe even 3 past papers and marking them. But if you don't analyze where you lost those marks, then it's almost useless. What the point of the TT revisioning method is, you find out where you are not getting the marks, where you're losing those marks, then they're the problem areas, right? Self-explanatory. You then go and develop actionable action hours, is what we call them, activities that go and target those so that you can improve them, so that when you repeat a test in test conditions, that then you actually see those gains translated, as opposed to just testing myself, I'm bad at these things, testing myself, I'm bad at these things, testing myself, I'm bad at these things. The improvement phase isn't in the standard student's approach to using past papers, and that's what the TT revision method is all about.
One thing, Redana, if I'll apologize now if I've got the pronunciation of that wrong, but what's important to remember as well is what you're saying here is that you can never remember everything. The hard work you put in is enough. Don't stress on what you could have done and focus on what you can do now. That's such a really important message. I love that. And whenever students ask me, what do I do the night before exam? And that is, just look at what you've achieved. Go over the past papers you've done using the TT method. Remind yourself of what you do know and not...
And read through your FFS journal.
And yes, absolutely, your FFS journal. We love that here. There was another one as well. Oh, there was a question here from June. I'll put that up on the screen. This is a really interesting one, actually. Does a teacher's attitude, or parents' attitude, I suppose, affect the student's grade at some point? What do we think to that, guys?
Oh, how deep do we want to go? Because, I mean, a parent's attitude is going to style your entire developmental conditioning. It's going to probably determine whether you are, someone who studies a lot, someone who just does everything at the last minute, because your parents are your role models or primary role models. So yes, of course, your parents' behavior and styling does, that's all of your conditioning as you're growing up, basically. But it's probably not the question that you really asked. So, I mean, yeah, your teacher is your academic role model in that subject. They're going to be the one who either inspires you to do the work and to understand it and to really, they can't teachers. It's not teachers' job to just matrix style put information in your head. We don't have that technology yet. A teacher's job is to give you the tools and the framework and the inspiration to do it for yourself. It's so 100% a teacher's attitude. Everyone's got teachers that they don't get on with, that they don't have any desire to work hard for, or to try and impress, or to do the work. And everyone's got teachers where that's the opposite, and they really want to show that teacher that they can do it, whatever that is. So, yeah, 100%. I'd say both of them.
I think coming from, as you get older, it's the benefit of hindsight is an amazing thing, as we've all realized, even, you guys now, the benefit of hindsight of how you did, last year towards your GCSEs and stuff. But I think that's kind of just a life lesson as well. Since leaving school and going to university and then getting jobs and doing what I've been doing, and I'm sure Rich and Ronnie will testify to this as well. That's just life. You're going to have to work for people, with people that you don't necessarily see eye to eye with. You don't necessarily agree with the way they're doing things, but you learn to adapt and kind of do the best you can within those scenarios, within those situations. And working with Rich and Ronnie is amazing, by the way. I'm not saying that I'm putting those two in that bracket at all, but like I said, it's just part of life. And I think, again, taking it back to what the title of this is taking control. And you need to think, right, well, what are the parameters I'm working within here? And you just do what you can. People are dealt different hands. We know this, whether it's, socioeconomics, whether it's kind of natural intelligence, photographic memory, call it what you want. But, everyone has got some tools at their disposal that they can use to the best effect, if you know what I mean. And it's just learning how to do that. And I think that's how I got by. I think I mentioned it in my live this week. last week, where I bombed my year 12. I got 3 U's in year 12. I got no problem telling people that. I just then went away and thought, right, well, the way I was doing things wasn't working. I need to focus on what does work. And then I was all right after that. I was successful after that. So it's just figuring it out. You need to have a good look at yourself and figure those things out. Sorry, it's getting deep there.
It's getting a bit deep, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, but that is the benefit of having a mentor and a role model who's been there and done it and sometimes made mistakes and learned from it. And pursuing what you enjoy. And if it's not something that you don't enjoy A-level biology directly, but you really want to do physiotherapy and you've done loads of work experience and you need it to get into the course, then sometimes having a clear motivational goal, like what you really want to achieve, is a good way of finding the motivation to do the thing that you don't necessarily always want to do. You know, like it might be chopping firewood. I want to be warm and I need to be warm, otherwise I'm going to freeze to death this winter. I don't enjoy chopping the firewood, but it's just the necessary evil, and the goal at the end of it is enough to pull you through and steer you and keep you motivated throughout. So I think shall we just summarize? We're coming towards the end of
can we just do one more? I know it's after past, but just I think the one that's just popped up at the bottom there is really relevant to a lot of people.
MDT, Bob.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's pull it up on the screen so we can read it through.
Sitting here looking at it, not doing anything about it.
I didn't do any work in lockdown. Now I'm so behind. At the same time as trying to catch up, I'm consistently getting more work and struggling to manage it all. Any tips? Well, have you tried TT? That would be my genuine first port of call. If you haven't tried it out, the first week is free. It's the fastest way that you can either recap and consolidate content that you've missed or to learn it on your own independently. It's just going to be, any TT subscribers here, approximately how much faster is it than using a textbook or traditional study method? You can ask it direct from the students' mouths here, because we've had lots of feedback. It's very fast. So if it's time and it's the overwhelming pressure of just not having enough time, then it's probably a very good option to do that. More so than a private tutor, because obviously you're only going to get 1 hour or so a week with a private tutor. Richard, I've got you look like you're about to say something then.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's about, again, coming back to what we were saying before about not the volume of stuff you need to do. It's figuring out what it is you've struggled with. Okay, so you kind of lapsed over lockdown. There's no way you're going to go back to the beginning of AS and just learn it all again from start to finish. And if you think that's what you're going to achieve, you're never going to achieve it. So what you need to look at, I would say, is if it's AS stuff that you've kind of like, oh, you know what, I've kind of swept it under the carpet for now. My advice would be just do an AS paper or both AS papers. Sit down, exam conditions, do 2 AS papers, a paper 1 and paper 2, and mark it. And then that will tell you it will give you an indication of what do you already know, what you kind of comfortable with, and what you know nothing about. So like in chemistry, if you bombed all the equilibria calculations and stuff, then put that on the list of things to do. So the first thing would be figure out what it is you've kind of struggled with because you've left it without doing it, and then do it. Because like I said, if you think you're going to just do everything in your spare time, everything that you missed out, then no, you're not going to do it, and it's going to be overwhelming, and you're just going to end up doing nothing. So it's about focusing on those most important things that you do need to catch up on, and use the free trial. Use the week free trial that we've got here at TT, and see how quickly you can actually get through it, and you'll be very, very surprised, I think.
Yeah, something that I was going to suggest there is excellent advice. Do AS revision papers, find what you are weak on, then let the marks determine that for you. Basically, you want to create a map of the content, the AS content and the A-level content. Obviously, there's bits of the A-level you haven't done yet. You don't need to worry about them yet, but you've got everything you have done up until this point. We at TT use a traffic light system, red, amber, green. So you could basically go through the sections of the spec, give it a red, an amber, or a green. How confident are you? Ideally, do that quantitatively using the TT revision method. So you do the paper. If you get a bad score on that topic, then that is the gets a red. And if you get a medium score, it gets an amber. You get a good score, it goes to be a green. So that way, then you isolate your reds, find your problem areas, create that map of the spec, find those problem areas, and then focus on those to begin with. That's where you're going to see your fastest gains. That's where you're going to see those those topics have the greatest impact, especially in the AS, because a lot of them are foundational to the A level. In biology, if you don't know your proteins, if you don't know your transcription, translation, DNA replication, then that's going to bite you on the arse later on. Whereas if it's an A level topic that only pops up in one place, then less things are contingent upon you knowing that. So, and ask me questions in the course if you need to.
Cool. So, summary,
just to
Rich?
say that just to feed that back, that Snooky Gaming, I don't know, I didn't see any others, said 5 to 10 times faster than using a textbook, basically. So like, if it's the time that's the thing that you're worried about, use TT. It will be, I will guarantee it to be 3 times faster than whatever method you're using to study or learn with right now, guaranteed, but probably 5 to 10.
Cool. So, taking control of your A levels, let's see if we can kind of box this off. Rich, have you got those 6 bullet points in front of you, mate?
I don't, but I can pull them up. They're on my other screen.
All right. I'm pretty sure that we didn't add anything extra to this, but
no.
First one, Rich said, use the specification. All right. So making sure you reference that, making sure you got a copy in your folder. This is similar to what we were saying last week. Ask your teacher for a copy of the scheme of work, or at least ask them, what topic are we doing next? When are we going to be finished in the specification? So you know when that is, so you can actually think about starting to revise. And if it
find out when your tests are going to be, and what's going to be on those tests. Yeah, absolutely. Number 3 was stay organized. Keep on top of it. If you move on and you haven't understood it right now, or your notes are in a mess, like, that is not a good foundation for you to be like, when your teacher tells you you've got a mock next week covering everything you've done so far this year, what are you going to do? If you've got a nice organized place for that to be, with our TT notes, we have template notes for every lesson, and we recommend they go in their own folder, so you have all your TT stuff as a nice revision guide at the end of the year. What I'll do too, as you did too, so getting ahead where possible, find out what's the next week's topics, use your TT videos, could use YouTube, could like do a bit of research on Wikipedia, get ahead so that when you get to that lesson, everything's making sense and you're answering some of those questions and filling in the gaps in your lesson, rather than just trying to learn it all for the first time. You'll see a massive difference to what you get out of your classroom lessons.
Absolutely. This is kind of similar to getting organized, but using your free periods. I'm a huge advocate of this. You are doing a full-time course. So when you've got free periods in school or college, try and use those to do your homeworks in. So then when you get home and you want to do an extra hour or something like that when you get home, use it for consolidation, and you will feel much, much better, rather than trying to put a homework together. And you know what? If you're struggling with a homework, as a TC member, take a pick. Maybe, but ideally with the workings that you've already tried to have a go at that, and send it to us within the comments underneath the relevant video, and we will help you with that. Okay, we can't guarantee we'll just give you the answer, so you can just write it down and hand it in as your homework. That's not what it's there for. But we're here to help you understand and work through those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note, I was going to say I did 5 A levels. I did 4 A levels plus general studies, which probably doesn't really count, but I did 5 A, so I didn't have any free periods. I didn't get that break because all my lessons were scheduled in those times. So yeah, for me, because it wasn't an option, I didn't feel hard done by from it. I mean, I made the decision to do that many A levels. That was just my decision. But you can use those. It feels like when you're given them, my friends who then try to revising them at the end of the year found that really difficult. So if you can set up a good schedule right now, and the last point on our list here is be proactive when it comes to learning. So just taking a little bit of time to not necessarily just taking your teacher's word for it, like looking at, okay, my goal is to get an A at the end of the year. This is when the exam date is. What do I need to have achieved in order to get an A? Then I need to be doing past papers from at least March, April, which means I have to have a good idea. Like, you can work backwards, build yourself a timeline from the exam, working backwards to achieve your goal. What do you need? And take active steps to pursue that. It's not going to just be given to you. And some teachers, make mistakes. They complete the content too late. They miss topics in the spec. So be proactive and take accountability for your A-level. It's your grade. It's your name on the paper. It's your responsibility.
100%. Well said, mate. So next week, what are we looking at next week? I don't know. What are we looking at next week?
Well, I'll tell you my live class this week. So Thursdays, 6 o'clock for my live class. I am doing transcription and translation as my AS focus. I'm doing some magnification calculations, and I'll make sure to include some scale bars in that because that's the thing that trips most students up. And polymerase chain reaction, highly relevant to coronavirus. All the positive tests, they are all PCR tests, and I can show you how they work, and I can tell you which bits of they're going to ask you in the exam, because there's elements of PCR that you need to know but never actually get tested. So I can give you the inside track on that as well.
Yeah, so my lives, I'm with Dana. The lives are for TT members, so they're within the course only, but you can get access to those in a free trial as well. So just to answer that question quickly. AS, I'm going to be looking at bonding and shapes of molecules, which is something that drives some students insane. So I'm going to try and hopefully box that off for you guys. In terms of the skills focus, I haven't really decided on what that's going to be yet, but it'll be good. I promise you that. And then the A-level focus, we're looking at electrochemistry. We started looking at it last week, so before you come on Wednesday, make sure you watch the recording of that from last week. So you got your basics there, all the skills that I taught you last week, because we're going to be looking at some electrochemistry questions, which is another thing that drives students insane in the third segment on Wednesday at 5:30 to 7:30. Ronnie?
Maths live classes, I'll let Ronnie give you the rundown, but maths live classes are 30 minutes a day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You get to vote in the content that comes up in those.
Yeah, Ronnie, so I have a look at the votes a few hours before and then do what people want for that day. So today the first years are going to do logs, but actually it's not so much logs, it's exponential equations. So solving exponential equations and understanding exponential growth and exponential decay. And second years we are going to do binomial expansion, but with the second years, we always do a load of trig and calculus, a load of differentiation and integration, because that's what needs to be done constantly to build up those skills. So that's 7 o'clock today for first years and 7:45 for second years.
Fantastic. Well, I think that about rounds it off. I was just replying to MS. If you let me know what topics you got, then I'll give you some info in the chat. Even if if we cut the video stream, if you let me know what topics, I'll give you a little bit of advice there. And our live classes are Zoom rooms, so private Zoom rooms for members only, basically. And occasionally we do sort of drop in stuff on YouTube, so it is worth giving us a like and hitting the subscribe button, because if we do some unprompted lives and we don't schedule them in advance, then obviously that way you'll get a notification to let you know that we're on there doing some biology, chemistry or maths A-level stuff. And it really does help if you just help the algorithm by hitting that like or sharing it with someone you think might find useful. The more visibility we get, the more followers we get, the more useful stuff we can do for you. So hit that like, subscribe button. And that's it for this week's. If not, see you next Monday, or see if you're one of my students, see you in the live class on Thursday.
See you guys.
Bye.